the little bell over the door, the cool hush of the place and the smell, a mix of soap and paper and something sweet drifting up from the fountain in the front. A man in a white coat behind the high counter in the back who looked up and called you by name. If you grew up in America between the 50s and the 80s, the corner drugstore was one of the warmest places in town. Part pharmacy, part soda fountain, part gathering place, run by a person who knew your whole family. And today, you and I are going to walk through it together, from the bell on the door to the prescription counter in the back, the way you did as a kid. But stay with me right to the end. Because the corner drugstore didn't just fade, it was replaced. And the giant chain that replaced it, the one with the name you'd know in an instant, just met a stunning end of its own. I'll tell you when we get there, so settle in. Picture it. The neon mortar and pestle in the window, the worn tile floor. The afternoon you walked in with a dime, the screen door tapping shut behind you. Ready? Let's go in. Push through the door, and there it is, right up front. The soda fountain, the long marble or formica counter, the row of chrome stools with the red vinyl tops that spun, and behind it, the gleaming fountain with its taps and its pumps and its big mirrors. Be honest, this was the real reason a kid came in. You climbed up on a stool that spun, and the soda jerk, that was the real name for him, the young man working the fountain, made your drink right in front of you, not from a can, from scratch. A squirt of flavored syrup, a pull of carbonated water, a stir, a cherry Coke, a vanilla Coke, a lime Ricky, an egg cream which had neither egg nor cream and that no one outside the neighborhood could ever explain. He'd make you a real malted milkshake so thick the straw stood up in it and serve it with the cold silver mixing cup on the side, holding the second half. This was where the whole town stopped for 15 minutes. The kids after school, the couples on a first date sharing one shake with two straws, the old men over coffee. A drugstore had a place to sit down and be happy, and that idea alone now sounds like something from a dream. And the soda jerk was a craftsman and a bit of a showman. He had a whole vocabulary, a secret diner code he called down the counter, and he billed each drink with a flourish. The scoop dragged just so, the syrup pumped, the seltzer pulled from the long-handled tap, the whipped cream and the cherry on top, the long spoon and the straw set just right. A banana split came in a boat. A sundae came in a tall fluted glass with a paper doily under it. You watched the whole thing being made, and the watching was half the pleasure. It was theater, performed for a kid on a spinning stool with 35 cents, and it made you feel, for 15 minutes, like the most important customer in the world. Spin around on the stool, to the lunch counter beside the fountain. Because the fountain didn't just do sweets, it served lunch. A short, perfect menu cooked on a little grill right behind the counter. The grilled cheese and the tuna melt, the egg salad sandwich, the bowl of soup, the slice of pie under a glass dome, turning slowly, the waitress in her apron who called everyone "hon" and knew your order before you sat down. It was cheap, it was hot, it was made by someone who'd worked that grill for 20 years, and you ate it elbow to elbow with your whole town. This was the lunch counter, before the fast food drive-thru took the very idea of a quick, cheap, hot meal and moved it out to a parking lot, served through a window by someone who'd never see you again. We traded the stool you spun and the waitress who knew your name for speed, and we mostly didn't notice it happening. And the counter had its regulars and its rhythms, the same old men on the same stools every morning, working through the newspaper and a bottomless cup of coffee, solving the town's problems. The mothers stopping in mid-errand with a kid in tow. The high schoolers crowding in after the final bell. The place suddenly loud and alive. The waitress who refilled your coffee without asking kept the regulars' orders in her head and somehow remembered that you liked extra pickle. It moved slow, and that was the point. It was a place to sit, not a place to grab and go. You lingered, you talked, you ran into people. The lunch counter was the unofficial town meeting, held 3 times a day over grilled cheese and pie, and nothing we built to replace it ever had a single stool to sit and stay a while. Step away from the counter, to the magazine rack and the spinner of paperbacks, the wire rack along the wall, fat with magazines, and the squeaking spinner rack of paperback books and, best of all, comic books. This is where you stood and read for free until the pharmacist cleared his throat. The comic books on the spinner. You turned it slowly, the whole rack creaking, and agonized over which one your dime would buy. The movie magazines with the stars on the cover, the crossword books, the TV listings. The drugstore was where a town got something to read, and a kid first discovered that a story could cost a dime and last a whole week. Over to the wall of small drawers and bottles, the cosmetics and the everyday things. The drugstore had a little of everything, packed onto its shelves with a particular logic. The face powder and the lipstick and the gold tubes, the shaving soap and the brush and the razor, the bottles of tonic and the tins of salve that promised to cure anything. And the patent medicines, the old remedies with the wonderful names, the bitters and the liniments and the syrups, half of which were mostly alcohol that a previous generation swore by for every ailment. The hot water bottle, the heating pad, the truss. The drugstore was the town's first stop for every small misery of the body, long before anyone thought to ask a search engine. Pause at the front register, and the man who ran it all. But the heart of the place wasn't a product. It was a person, the pharmacist, the druggist, and he was one of the most trusted people in the whole town. He stood at his high counter in the back, in his white coat, and he knew everybody. He knew your mother's prescriptions and your grandfather's heart pills, and he'd been filling them for 30 years. You could ask him anything, about a fever, a rash, a cough, a worry, and he'd come out from behind the counter and talk to you, for free, for as long as it took. He was the doctor you could afford, the one with no appointment and no bill for a question. He'd open up after hours in an emergency. He'd let a family run a tab in a hard month. He knew which kids were his and gave them a free cherry Coke on a bad day. The corner druggist was woven into the life of a town in a way that is almost impossible to explain to anyone who's only ever handed a slip to a stranger behind a tall plastic window. And he was there for a lifetime. He filled your mother's prescriptions when she was carrying you, and then he filled yours, and he'd ask after your grandmother by name and mean it. When the doctor's office was closed and the baby had a fever at 9 at night, you called the druggist at home, and he came down and opened the store and helped you, because that was simply what he did. He knew which families were struggling and quietly rounded the price down. He knew which old folks lived alone and noticed when they didn't come in. He was a pharmacist, yes, but he was also a counselor, a neighbor, a fixture, and a kind of guardian of the town's health, a one-man safety net standing behind a wooden counter. When he retired or sold out, the town didn't just lose a store, it lost one of the people who had quietly held it together. Look at the front window, the neon, and the way the store announced itself, the mortar and pestle glowing in neon, the sign that said simply drugs or Rexall or the family name, because so many of these were named for the person who owned them. These were not identical boxes stamped out across the country. Each corner drugstore was its own place, with its own smell, and its own character, and its own owner, whose name was on the sign, and whose kids you went to school with. The window display changed with the seasons, the suntan lotion in summer, the cold remedies in winter, the Valentines and the Easter candy. It was a fixture of Main Street, as much a part of the town as the church and the school. And it kept the hours of a real neighbor, not a corporation. It opened when the town woke and closed when the town slept, but the druggist's home number was on the door for emergencies. The same hand-lettered signs went up in the window every year. The back-to-school display, the Christmas perfume sets, the spring seeds. Generations of kids pressed their faces to that glass at the toys and the candy. Couples met under that neon sign. It was a landmark you gave directions by, turn left at the drugstore, because everyone knew exactly which one you meant, since there was only one, and it had been there longer than anyone could remember. A chain store is a brand that happens to be in your town. The corner drugstore was of your town, and there has never been anything quite like it since. Down the aisle, to the camera counter and the photos. The drugstore was where your memories were developed. You dropped off the roll of film in its little envelope, and you waited a week, and you came back to pick up the prints, and the whole family crowded around right there at the counter to see if the vacation pictures had come out. And the camera counter sold the film, and the flash cubes, and the simple little cameras themselves. This was the place that turned light into memory for a whole town. one yellow and red envelope at a time. The thrill of opening that envelope, of seeing whether the moment had survived, happened right here at the drugstore counter for generations. And you got doubles, usually, 2 prints of every shot so you could give 1 set away, and there was always the little packet of didn't come out, the blurry ones and the dark ones, and the accidental shot of someone's thumb that you flipped through and laughed at and somehow kept anyway. You stood right there at the counter and went through them then and there, reliving the birthday or the trip you'd half forgotten in the week it took to develop. The drugstore photo counter was where a family's whole history slowly accumulated, one envelope at a time, and the lady who ran it had quietly seen every wedding, baby, and vacation in town go by in little glossy stacks. To the back corner, the candy and the toys, and the things for a kid with a nickel. Every drugstore had it, the candy counter and the little toy section, positioned exactly at a child's eye level, because the druggist understood his customers perfectly. The penny candy in the case, the bin of cheap toys, the Halloween costumes in the fall, the Valentines in February, the beach toys in June. A kid came into the drugstore for a comic and a candy bar and left having spent every cent. And the druggist rang it up on the big register with a smile, because that kid would be his customer for the next 70 years. And for a kid, the drugstore was a place you could go alone, with your own money, and be treated like a real customer. You walked in with the change you'd scrounged. You took your sweet time at the candy case. You carried your little purchase up to the counter yourself, and you walked out feeling 6 inches taller. It was where a lot of us first learned to handle money, to make a choice, to be a person in the world for 10 minutes without a parent. The corner drugstore trusted a kid with a nickel, and that small dignity of being someone's customer at age 8 is one more quiet thing we didn't know we'd miss. Now to the high counter in the back, the prescription counter itself. Raised up a step behind a tall wooden counter where you could just see the top of the pharmacist's head as he worked, counting pills on a little tray, typing the label, mixing things by hand in the back. There was a real ceremony to it. You handed up the doctor's slip, written in that famous unreadable scrawl, and the druggist nodded and disappeared into the back among the rows of amber bottles. And you waited on a wooden bench, and in time he came back with the little bottle and a few words of advice. It was personal. It was unhurried. He looked you in the eye. And if you couldn't quite cover it that week, more often than not, he found a way. And now, the end I promised you at the very start. Here's what happened to the corner drugstore. It didn't vanish on its own. It was bought up and squeezed out and replaced by the big chains. The corner druggist sold out or got undercut, and in his place came the enormous chain drugstore. The same one on every corner, with the prescription counter pushed to the very back behind a tall plastic window, and a stranger behind it who'd never see you twice. And the biggest of those chains has a name you know, Rite. Founded in 1962, it grew into thousands of stores across the country, one of the giants that helped put the corner druggist out of business. And here is the stunning part. Rite is gone too. It filed for bankruptcy and then filed again, and in 2025, after 63 years, it closed every single one of its stores. The chain that replaced the corner drugstore could not survive either. And it's not alone. About a third of all the pharmacies in America have closed since 2010. So now, in town after town, there is no corner druggist who knows your name, and no chain store either. Just a longer and longer drive to fill a prescription, and a plastic window somewhere with a stranger behind it. We let the warm little place with the soda fountain die, thinking the big efficient chain was the future. And now the chain is dying too, and a lot of towns are left with nothing at all. There's a hard lesson buried in that. The corner drugstore wasn't just inefficient and sentimental, it was resilient because it was rooted. It belonged to a person who lived in the town and would never let it fail without a fight. The chain that replaced it belonged to no one and nowhere. When the spreadsheet stopped working, headquarters closed 2,000 stores in a season and walked away, and not one of them was anybody's life's work. We were told the chain was progress, cheaper, bigger, more modern, and it was, right up until the day it simply switched off the lights in every town at once and left. That's what happened to the corner drugstore. We didn't trade it for something better. We traded something that loved us for something that didn't. and then even that went away. So that's our drugstore. The fountain's wiped down, the neon's dark, the bell over the door is still. Now I want to hear about yours. Which one stopped you cold? The soda jerk making your cherry Coke? The pharmacist who knew your whole family? The comic book rack you read for free? Tell me down in the comments. And tell me the name of the drugstore your town grew up with, because I read every single one, and I'm building the next one from your memories. If this brought even a little of it back, subscribe and come sit with us again. Next time, we're climbing into the family car, the one with the bench seats, the AM radio, and not a seatbelt in sight, for a Sunday drive the way we used to take them. We'll leave the light on for you.